In the previous video, we designed this cottage using two-point perspective. And in this part, we'll work on the details to turn this drawing into a mountain view. Now, instead of this very flat and simple horizon line, I want to erase it and make the space a little more dynamic and natural. Erase it very lightly so that it doesn't completely disappear. I'll leave a faint line so that I know that my horizon line is here. Now I'm going to change this land by creating a few curved and unbalanced lines. I'm going to make it look like it is located on a small hill. I can draw some trees in the background of the page behind the cottage. I'm going to draw one of these trees right here near the house. Pine trees are the best trees to create a mountainous atmosphere. You usually see these trees on mountains. By the way, drawing a pine tree is very easy. First, draw the trunk of the tree. The trunk of a pine tree is usually not too thin nor too thick. Then from the very bottom of the trunk, start adding leaves and complete the tree by adding leaves. And there's no need to draw the trunk from here on. Draw some sharp curved shapes outwards. The branches usually overlap each other and curve outwards and downwards. As we go higher, the tree will have less volume and eventually it will look thinner at the top. So continue to draw the leaves as you go towards the top. I'm just using a simple HB pencil here. As a result, the pine tree should become a cone shape with needle or sharp leaves shapes. Part of the tree will be behind the hut. This will help to better compose the image. I also draw some sharp lines down the middle. Not all branches and leaf lines need to be connected. Draw lines around the leaves in these empty spaces. This will give your drawing a more dynamic feel and depth. And here we have a pine tree now. We'll finish this later and work on details. I can add another tree on this side to create a little balance in the space, but I'll place this tree a little further behind the hut. Balance doesn't necessarily mean symmetry. Your composition should have a sense of naturalness. I'm going to draw the tree trunk here, darken it a little bit. Then I'm going to start adding the pine needle-like leaves from the very bottom of the stem. I'm also going to start drawing from this side because some of this tree is behind the cabin. I want to draw this one bigger than the previous one, so I'm going to mark the top and I can continue adding the leaves from the top. As I said in this series of landscape tutorials, I started the lessons by drawing very simple houses, putting them in perspective, and now we're slowly moving towards drawing the landscape. I'm starting with a simple landscape here so that we can gradually learn to draw more advanced landscapes. It might be a good idea to add some pine trees here in the background. I'm going to draw these much lighter and kind of more blurred, simplifying the details to give the feeling of trees being far away. I'll add a few more here to show the pine trees in the surrounding mountains in the background. Now it's time to change the empty space in front of the house and add some elements to it. A good option for this is to add grass and various plants. For this, I'll use a 3B pencil instead of the HB pencil I had on hand. I love this pencil so much that I use it a lot and it got too small, so I had to put it in a pencil holder. I'll sharpen the tip a little to give the drawing a better texture. Now I'm going to start here and add some sharp lines to make it look like grass and plants. I want these areas to be almost covered with grass and plants. The surface where the house and the ground underneath it are connected is so stiff and straight. It should be smooth and even irregular. I'm going to add a curved line here. I want the ground here to look a little more uneven, like a hill. With random sharp lines, I create my grass wherever I want. I'm going to draw a few more curved lines on the ground surface. You can cover the traces of these lines with short pointy lines to give it the feel of grass. You have to be a little patient, so don't rush to draw the grass. This way you can have much better result. I'll draw some random uneven lines here on this part so that the ground doesn't look so flat. The line here is very rough. This is the line where the house meets the ground. I want to make this line a little more smooth. Add some darker shadows and slightly add texture to the bottom of the line on the ground. Go up from the border of the line and extend the grass texture to the cottage. Again, I'll add some lines here. I can create another curved line here and fill it with some grass. Using a kneaded eraser can be very useful here. Take a little bit of the eraser and fade this straight line that is visible under the grass a little bit. As you can see, this line is also visible in this part, so I'll erase it here. With gentle pressure, I'll tap on it to make it more faint. This helps the grass not be uniform and boring and to appear bolder and darker in some places and thinner and more scattered in other places, which ultimately looks more natural. I also have these lines here that I can use my eraser to fade them out. You can do this for the lines in this part where the hut and the ground are connected. You can do this with slow, scattered strokes. The eraser will remove parts of the pencil trace randomly from the paper. If you encounter very bold and stubborn lines, you can drag the eraser a little more evenly and with more pressure to clean it up. I'm going to erase this completely so I can draw the grass again. If the lines of the cottage or the door are faded too much, you don't need to bring them back. Cover some of the faded parts with grass and plants. It's much more natural now than before. You can take a risk and even extend the grass and plant lines covering the house itself, so you can have some taller grass like this here. You don't necessarily need to draw all the grass lines on this line you created. Create a series of lines up, down, around, scattered. You can even draw a bush in the foreground with more detail. Now our drawing seems to have everything except a few rocks and stones. Okay, so let's draw some rocks. Drawing rocks isn't too hard. Create a series of lines in the shape of ovals that are a little irregular and have an organic shape. Here I can draw a few more. I'll add a larger rock in the back, a few smaller ones in the front, and then I'll add some curved lines around the rocks. You can draw as much as you want. You can even add a series of rocks next to each other to your image here. Let's go back to the background. I'll darken these pine trees a little. I also create a series of straight lines behind these trees. And the same in these parts. These lines give a richer background to the drawing, as if to suggest to the viewer that there are a series of straight trees side by side in the distance like a forest, but they're so far away that not much detail is visible from them, and they just look like parallel lines next to each other. Now we'll move on to the shadows and shading the drawing to work on them a little more. I take out the 2B pencil and go to draw my tree in more detail. Pay attention to the lines I'm creating. I'm creating needle-shaped lines downwards and outwards again on different parts of my design. As I go higher, my lines become less dense, and as a result, the tree becomes thinner. There's no need to elaborate too much on the ascending parts. So I'm done with this pine tree. Before I move on to the other one, I'm going to sharpen my pencil a little bit because I need a sharper tip to draw the leaves on the tree. Now I'm going to add a little bit to the overall shadow of the drawing. If you notice, the shadows are falling on the right side of the image, so that means the sunlight is coming from the left. So if I'm going to shade the tree, these parts of the tree should be a little darker. So I'm going to do a general shadow here, not too dark, just a thin layer of graphite on the paper by creating diagonal hatching lines. I'm also going to put a layer of shadow on the roof. From this corner, I'm going to darken my shadows, and as I go to the left, I'm going to reduce the depth of my shadows and go to the light gradually. And then I'm going to add another layer. This time I'm going to do the hatching in different directions. I'll do the same thing in this part of the hut. As I go to this side, I'm going to make it lighter. I'll really darken these areas that are under the edge of the roof. You might notice I didn't draw the roof edge super smooth. That's because I'm going for a slightly vintage and worn look, as I said. Now I'm going to darken this area where the door connects to the body of the house. I want the shadow from the door frame to fall on the house itself. So I'm just adding a little bit of shading here. The shadow would also fall in this area. So I'm darkening this part too. Just do what I'm doing and making the shaded areas darker. This wood plank is resting on the main part of the door, so I'll darken both sides of it. This helps it look like it's really sitting on the door. Then I'll also darken both sides of this wood at the top to give it some depth. This horizontal piece of wood is above this slanted piece, so I'll darken the area where it overlaps to show that it is on top. With just a few simple tricks, we've given the wood door dimension and depth. I'm also going to darken this part of the door frame to make it pop a bit and stand out from the cottage wall. Adding these shadows make the door seem more prominent in this part of the house. Again, I'm just lightly shading these areas. This side doesn't really need shading, but you can add a very soft layer of shadow to this area to make the whole image look more balanced. You can also add a little shading to the area under the edge of the roof. Now to keep these planks from looking too flat, I'll darken the middle area between them a little. I'm darkening them randomly and unevenly. Some spots with more shadow, some with less. I also add some random darkening to this side to make the planks look more interesting and dynamic. I'm going to add a little shading to the side of the chimney, but I'll keep it pretty light so it blends in nicely with the scene. Next, I'll shade these areas on the ground a bit, as if the hot shadow is falling on this part of the hill. I'll also darken the rocks a little, but again, I'll be careful not to smudge the lines too much when I'm shading. Then I'll shade these rocks a bit from the right side because they're facing away from the sun. Now let's go back to our trees. I'm going to darken this part of the trees on the right side with some very soft shadows. You don't need to add anything fancy to the leaves to texture here. Just shade this side with simple hatching lines. Add just a few hatching lines to make this part of the tree darker. I'm also going to add a shadow on the ground, like the tree's shadow is slightly visible there. Remember to make your shadows softer and more diffuse as you move outwards. Darken the leaves in this area that are right behind the house because the cottage is blocking even more light from reaching them. Paying attention to small details like this will really make your drawing look more natural. Feel free to vary the direction of your shadow lines a bit to give your shadow some nice texture. So it looks like the light is coming from this direction, so I'm darkening these areas. I'll do the same for this tree. I'll start from the bottom, slowly building up the shadows. I'll change the direction of my lines a little bit too. You can even darken these rocks a bit more if you like. You can add a little more detail to your drawing by drawing a few more rocks or different grass or plants. Finally, double check your drawing and add any last finishing touches that you feel it needs. And that's it for this tutorial. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Have fun drawing, and I see you in the next tutorial. Bye!